Oh, here we go. The NCAA could drop the hammer on Michigan. That would be a mistake.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth: realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. We've always got you covered. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. USC's record prediction, all 12 games right here on the show. I think they're going to overachieve, and spoilers in a 12-team playoff. You gotta watch for those this year. But we start with Michigan, everybody's favorite topic. Back in the news because there was a leak of a draft of a notice of allegations that Michigan is going to be sanctioned and Michigan is going to get punished, and you're going to have people on both sides of the spectrum here. And those ends of the spectrum go something like this. Michigan should not be punished, and they did nothing wrong, and it was all fine, and everybody's doing it. And the other end of the spectrum is they're literally the Houston Astros, but they are somehow worse. It's an illegitimate championship. They're cheaters, and they should have it stripped. It should all be void and all of that stuff. I, like usual, am going to come down somewhere in the middle here. The NCAA laying down the hammer would be a mistake. The NCAA's reputation is already on thin ice. It's not great. And so if you're an organization that is trying to quite literally fight for your own survival, continue operating, existing, and you've already had a slew of court cases over the last several months in which you have gone and laid out your claims and on several occasions gotten your teeth kicked in the courtrooms, whether that was the USC case or the the Dartmouth men's basketball team or the Tennessee NIL case. There were a lot of instances. I didn't even mention House v. NCAA. These things are not going the NCAA's way. Coming in and putting your foot down and say this will not be tolerated. We're going to have big punishments and we're going to suspend Sharon Moore and we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, that's not in the NCAA's best interests here. It's not actually in anybody's best interest. Now, I am not doing this to placate people on the other side. I do, however, see the perspective of punishment is clearly warranted. I know that Jim Harbaugh was already suspended last year, but if they are alleging new allegations against Michigan and individuals who are still at the university, punishment can absolutely be warranted. I am not opposed. I just want the punishment to be fit for what the crime actually was. Because there are going to be some people out there who want the national championship taken away, and Sharon Moore is a disgrace, and all this sort of stuff. And they did a lot of things that I am not a fan of, and challenge the integrity of the game. And those need to be addressed, and it needs to be made clear, this is not okay. But you are not going to see an SMU situation here. Because how did that go for the NCAA? When you think about the credibility of that organization, do you think it was helped that they cut the SMU football program? It went away. It ceased to exist, got the death penalty for things that are now legal. Stealing signs is not going to become legal one day. But you have to understand there is a difference between holding up a cashier at gunpoint and knocking off a convenience store and speeding going 75 in a 55. Okay? It's wrong to go 75 in a 55 or 75 in a 50. That's not good. You're putting others at harm. You need to get a ticket for that. But do not fall into the trap of thinking like, well, it's wrong and therefore it's all the same. No, it's not. Because here's the other angle where I come down on Michigan's side. I am a baseball fan, and I think the Houston Astros are despicable. I think they are terrible. Spencer, how can you hold these two opinions at the same time? Watch, I'm going to do it. When the postseason run was taking place, in which the sign stealing allegations or scandal, whatever you want to call it, were happening, which we know in both instances they were, The Michigan angle doesn't actually have the people responsible for that or the actions that we know of at this time. The actual sign stealing wasn't taking place while they were playing all these games because it was found out during the season, and then Stalions was fired and Harbaugh was suspended and Stalions then not on staff, and presumably, unless I'm presented with evidence otherwise, but I have seen no reporting from anyone anywhere to indicate that this is the case, there was not sign stealing taking place during the biggest games of the year. So if you look at the games where Connor Stalions was there and they did have a sign stealing advantage, then guess what? You have a leg to stand on of, I don't know if that win is the same. I don't think that they can, say they would have won that football game. I don't know which games they would have lost exactly because they went on to win the national championship. And that's where I come down on Michigan's side, is the individual primarily responsible for this whole sign stealing scandal was removed from the organization, and they went to play Nick Saban's SEC champion Alabama team and an undefeated red hot Washington team who had not lost a game in like 20 consecutive contests, and they won those games fair and square. So do I support some punishment coming down? Yes. If you acted or were a part of, either you were coaching it or allowing it to happen, if you have violated some instance or some rule about sign stealing and you have acted inappropriately, I'm fully supportive of there being punishment. But I do not put Michigan in the same camp as the Astros. Initially, I did, and I had that visceral reaction. And then as time went on, I realized, wait, the sign stealing's gone, and they're still winning the games. Compare that to the Astros, who won their first World Series in 2017. They were stealing the signs with the trash cans and whatnot during the postseason. They did it in 2018 too. They didn't win the World Series that year, but they had it when they won the World Series. They didn't win another World Series for 5 years. If you take that Michigan team and you put it on the field this year, it's a national title contender. I'm talking about the 2023 team. If you put it on the field in 3 years, if you put it on the field 3 years ago, yeah, that's a national title capable team. I saw one genius, I don't even know his name, I don't want to give him the clout because it was such a ridiculous take, that pointed out that Harbaugh's record before Connor Stalions started stealing signs was good but not great, and then it went to elite once Stalions got there. Like, Oh, that one just went right to my soul and just infuriated it because it couldn't possibly be. You talk about post hoc ergo proctor hoc, after therefore because, couldn't possibly be that Jim Harbaugh had established a program and a culture and things did start to come together, and he took a salary reduction and the pressure was on, and he started making investments in his staff, and he had a Broyles Award winner on staff, and he brought in a future first round quarterback. That couldn't have changed the landscape. Who were Jim Harbaugh's early quarterbacks? Compare them to J.J. McCarthy, please. I'm not even the world's biggest J.J. McCarthy fan. I think he's good. I thought he was a good player, worthy of being a first-round pick. But did I think he was some world beater? No, he's good. He's good. He's got more potential than what he showed in college. He's good. But he was way better than Cade McNamara. He was way better than anybody that they had before. He was a difference maker. He was a difference maker there. That take in particular, again, I didn't even write down the name of the pundit who said that because he was so, oh my gosh. I didn't recognize the guy's name, and that drove me up a wall. Like, winning takes a very long time. It took Kirby Smart, wait for it, 5 years to win a national championship. 5 or 6. It was not immediate. And it took Jim Harbaugh a very long time. It's not easy. So that's my Michigan rant. Are punishments warranted? Yes. Yes. They absolutely can be, because you need to have a form of deterrence. Just make the punishment fit the crime, because with SMU you didn't. And the NCAA lost a lot of credibility with that. They shouldn't do that again here. And I don't think college football fans should want that either. But some of you will, and that's okay. USC is going to overachieve this year. What does that actually mean? Well, because of some national pundits, that's a pretty low standard. So I think they're going to overachieve. I'll get their record prediction coming up next. First, let's talk about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I read a piece in ESPN the other day that USC has one of the toughest non-conference schedules in all of college football. Well, that's objectively true. They have a neutral site game week 1 against LSU to begin the regular season, and they end at home against Notre Dame, a team who I talked about last week on the show, who I think is going to be an 11-1 football team. So, yeah, tough schedule here for USC. I think they're going to overachieve. Everyone continues to just set the bar low. They just are setting the bar low. The FanDuel win total for Lincoln Riley, despite making the defensive coaching investments and changes that he needed to do 2 years ago, admittedly, despite making those moves, the win total is 7.5. I think it's partially a reflection of the schedule. You know, Lincoln Riley and USC wanted to get out of this game against LSU week 1. I don't blame him. Not with the way that other schools have manipulated non-conference schedules. He's looking at LSU and Notre Dame and saying, I have to win, or I face tough questions, or I face pressure, and fans, boosters get unhappy and such. So let's predict all 12 USC games right here. I've been a fan of USC's offseason. I think Miller Moss is good. I think their offensive line is an underrated question mark here. But do you know who didn't land everyone that they wanted to in the defensive line? You know who has at least a couple questions up front? LSU. You've heard pundits, maybe, I have at least, like Josh Pate talk about whether LSU is going to hold up along that defensive line. If you're not poised to capitalize on USC's offensive line, I think the Trojans are going to be a pretty good team this year. I felt this for a while, and I'm going to back it up. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is here, at least in the show sense. So, week 1, neutral site, Sunday game, September 1st. By the way, we're 19 days away from college football. Do you realize that? I know. It's great. September 1st, Allegiant Stadium, LSU, USC, big game. Trojans are a pretty sizable underdog here. I think USC is going to win the game outright for 2 reasons. Number 1, you're going to have more Trojan fans at this game because of the proximity to Los Angeles than LSU fans. And if that is not the case, shame on you, Trojan fans, because this should be a 60-40 home crowd in favor of USC. That's the first reason. The second reason is you have a couple of quarterbacks and a couple of third-year head coaches who I know can be good. I just don't know whether they are good, because I haven't seen them start for an entire season. I know what the potential is. I know they're capable. And so if you're asking me to choose between those two guys, yeah, who has a better track record with quarterbacks in the last 5 years in college football than Lincoln Riley? The answer is nobody. That was a rhetorical question. So I lean towards Miller Moss over Garrett Nussmeier, but both certainly very, very capable. Both have had defensive overhauls, and I like what USC has done. So give me the Trojans to beat LSU. This is not going to be a popular pick, but that's how I feel. That's just how I feel. I don't hate you, LSU. I don't think you stink. I don't think Brian Kelly's awful. I just think USC is going to find a way to win that football game, surprise some people, so they go 1-0. Then they come back home, they play Utah State. That's an easy win. Then they go on the road at Michigan. I was talking about that defensive line. I don't know if there's really anyone in all of college football, let alone on the Trojans offensive line, that can block Mason Graham. That Michigan front four should be very good. It's probably going to be the strongest aspect of their defense, which again should be good. They've got Wink Martindale as a defensive coordinator. This game is in Ann Arbor. I'd still probably like Michigan if it were at the Coliseum. I think USC's home field advantage is average at best, quite frankly. I've been in that stadium before. It's, it's fine. It's not bad. It's not, like what they have over at UCLA across the way at the Rose Bowl. They fill it up more than that, but it's nothing to write home about. So at Michigan, in Ann Arbor, I think that's USC's first loss of the year. Then they come back home where they play a Wisconsin team who will give them a fight. But I like the Trojans in that spot. I think they have the better roster. I think you've got the better, more proven head coach. And you certainly have an advantage at quarterback there. I don't think down in sunny California, that Wisconsin Big Ten physicality, push them around, it is going to slow down the USC offense in the way that Badger fans might hope or think. Next week, at Minnesota. I think Minnesota, I don't have a great feel on Minnesota, to be honest with you. I think Minnesota... maybe they could be all right. You could talk me into 6-7 win team. Maybe. I like USC here. I'm sticking with the Trojans because until someone gives me a compelling reason to pick against them, a team that I've liked all offseason and still like going into the year, I'm going to pick them to win the football game. So I think they win at Minnesota, and they start the year 4-1. This should be a top 20 team at this point with the resume they have, with a win over LSU and a loss at Michigan, and then wins over Wisconsin and Minnesota. Then they come back home. I think this is loss number 2. I think this is loss number 2 because I like the improvements that I expect to see from USC on the defensive side of the ball. I think Penn State is a more complete football team. And Drew Aller with Andy Kotelnicki as his offensive coordinator coming over from Kansas this offseason should be able to take a leap forward. I think they're going to be good enough on that side of the ball. And don't forget, when people think about Penn State, they jump straight to the way they play against Michigan and Ohio State, which were, single-digit games a year ago, mind you. But when Penn State plays people not named, Michigan and Ohio State the last few years, they've been great. They have not been good. They have been great. So I think Penn State is the more complete team. I think they go all the way across the country, and they get the win in the Coliseum. Then it's a trio of victories, 2 of them on the road for USC. At Maryland, I don't have high hopes for the Terps and Mike Locksley this year. I think he's a really good guy. I think he's a decent coach. I don't love their quarterback situation going into this year. I don't even know if they love their quarterback situation going into this year. They come back home against Rutgers. That would be a sneaky tough game. Rutgers is a sneaky tough team in the Big Ten. That is... I would not want to travel to Piscataway. There is a team that is going to travel to New Jersey this year that on the surface you'd say, they won't lose to Rutgers. And I'm going to pick them to lose to Rutgers. You'll just have to keep tuning into the show to find out who that is. But that's not USC in this spot. At home, they'll be okay. Next week, they go at Washington in Seattle. Again, first-year head coach. Even Jed Fish described Washington as a complete and total reset this year. I'm not saying Washington isn't going to have urgency to win at home or that they don't want to play well or they won't play hard. I just think USC is a better football team. I think they've got more talent, and I think they are more put together. The system is more established. Everything there screams a USC win. But then they come back home, and I think this is the final loss for USC in the regular season. I like Nebraska. Dylan Raiola doesn't have to win the Heisman Trophy in his freshman year for Nebraska to be a good football team. You might say, oh, Nebraska wasn't that good. Nebraska did this. First of all, Nebraska was a 5-win team last year. That's not great, but it's not horrible. They weren't some train wreck dumpster fire outside of the quarterback position. If they fix all of that, I think their weapons are fine. I think they'll be elevated by Dylan Raiola at the quarterback spot, but that is a good defensive staff. I expect them to be able to run the football. They have a couple of really, really talented running backs, and I think Nebraska is just a good team. By the way, they have the same win total as USC. That's not by accident. It's not by accident. Because FanDuel, I think, sees what I see, which is, Nebraska's a good team. Then USC, this could be a really, really great game, and it could come down to a field goal, a play, a drive, a stop. I could see this one going either way. But I like Nebraska because I think their defense is going to be able to travel. And I like that side of the ball a little more than, say, Wisconsin down at the Coliseum. So I think that is the last loss of the regular season for USC. And they'll be sitting there at 7-3, and everyone will be asking questions, and the pressure will ratchet up on Lincoln Riley. And then he's going to go play a team who I've been down on all offseason. I continue to be down on, and the more I think about it, the more I think I might have their record prediction at some point on the show be one of the worst records that I do a prediction for. If you have a team you want me to do, let me know. But that team is UCLA. UCLA is going to be in for a rough year. And last year, Lincoln Riley lost that game to UCLA at home. That was a bad loss. That was a bad loss. Should not have lost the game. I think he is going to go in incredibly dialed. You're going to have motivated, energized USC players for that rivalry game. Certainly UCLA will get up for it. I understand that. USC is the better team on both sides of the ball and at head coach especially. I think they go in and dog walk the Bruins in the Rose Bowl there. And then they come back home and they beat Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is going to be undefeated going into that matchup, and USC is going to get the win. Final week of the regular season at home, I like Notre Dame. I like their staff. I like the players they've got. I like Riley Leonard at quarterback. But I like USC. If this game were in South Bend, Notre Dame's losing. But the good news, they're back at home. And I think that USC has enough to win that football game. So USC overachieving this year at 9-3. That's overachieving to a lot. Is that a playoff team? Probably not. You probably can't get in with 3 losses. It's not impossible. You could be in the discussion. You could be around the playoff. But I think Lincoln Riley does not have another down year. And remember, this is a guy who in a full season of college football has only won fewer than 10 games once. That was this past year. Changes have been made. I think they could get to 10-2. That's probably their ceiling with this schedule, which is far from a cakewalk. I think 10-2 is their ceiling, but I think they end up going 9-3 with losses at Michigan and at home to Penn State and Nebraska. Gosh, I love record prediction season. It is the best time of year. Do you know what a bid stealer is? You need to if you were any sort of college football fan, doesn't matter who you root for. We're going to talk about them coming up next. After we talk about FanDuel, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets literally anytime that I am in the mood, 24/7, 365. The app's available to you. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. They've got something for everyone, every day, all summer long. How great is that? Absolutely magnificent. You can bet everything you want for college football. If you think I'm crazy on USC and you think they stink, then bet them under 7.5 wins. Good luck. Good luck. They're winning at least 8 games this year, and as I said, I think it's 9. But you can look at their win total, you can look at UCLA's, you can look at Oklahoma's, you can look at Alabama's, you can look at everybody's. So go check it out. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go for everything you want, including college football. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. It is not a guarantee that there will be spoilers in the 12-team playoff this year. It is entirely possible, though. So the concept of a spoiler here is a team that capitalizes on an auto bid in the conference championship game and would not have otherwise made the playoff. Winning it and getting the auto bid is the only way they'd make it, and that is absolutely in play. There are actually several teams to which this can happen. Now, given the landscape of the Big Ten and the SEC, I don't think you will have any bid stealers in there. Anybody that makes the SEC or Big Ten championship game, in all likelihood, would make it if they didn't make that championship game. And the only instance in which, and I don't even know that this qualifies because they wouldn't be getting the auto bid, if you had a 10-2 SEC or Big Ten team, like say Ole Miss goes 10-2 and goes to the SEC title game against Georgia or someone and then loses and they're 10-3, you see that 3 in the loss column. But if the losses are to Alabama and Georgia twice, do you think Ole Miss is getting in the playoff? Yeah, I think they probably are. So I don't think that quite falls into the category of what I'm thinking about here. But the Big 12 and the ACC are ripe to have some bid stealers. Think back to 2022. Do you remember that season? I remember that season. I was there. I was a college football fan, as I have been my entire life. Kansas State makes the Big 12 championship game with a record of 9-3. TCU is 12-0. And what do you know? Kansas State wins the Big 12 championship, and a 3-loss Kansas State team gets to go into the playoff and they would have had a first round bye. Can you imagine? Just as someone who loves the college football regular season more than anything else other than March Madness on the face of the planet, I just, gosh, it's repulsive, but that's the world that we have. So that's an example of a potential bid stealer. Or think Utah in the Pac-12, RIP, from several seasons ago. They, in 2021, went 9-3 in the regular season. And guess what? They would have been in with a first-round bye at 10-3, and you would have had, meanwhile, an 11-2 SEC or Big Ten championship game loser, or an 11-2 ACC championship game loser not get in. But hey, this is the auto bid system. Just remember the vitriol that I have for not just the expanded playoff, but the auto bids especially drive me up a wall. Just remember it right now during the time before the season. Because if this comes to pass, I'm going to come on here and say, I told you so, this is dumb. A lot of you might hear or watch this take and just disregard it. And then you'll come back months later, I can't believe, Spencer, can you believe that this team gets in? Yeah, I can. I think it's great that the G5 is able to make the playoff. I think it is patently absurd that they get an automatic playoff spot. So any G5 champion to me is a bid stealer, just on its surface. That's just what it is. It's a stolen spot. It's a stolen spot. You can have a G5 team that could put together a playoff roster. We saw Cincinnati do it, or a playoff season rather, and have a good enough schedule with good enough wins. Yeah, it's just not a fan. Not a fan. But the winner of the Big 12 championship game could have multiple losses that wouldn't otherwise have gotten in. And in the ACC or the Big 12, a team that has 2 or 3 losses in the regular season is highly unlikely to find themselves making the playoff if they don't win the conference championship and get in. So, few teams that I think are really ripe for this. Certainly you can make the case for others, but off the top of my head in the Big 12, what about a team like Kansas? What if Kansas stumbles early in the season against Illinois? I don't think they will. But what if they stumble early in the season against Illinois? And they have 1 or 2 other losses and they're ranked, let's say 17th going into the Big 12 championship game. Or think about those ACC title games that Pitt or Virginia found themselves in at 8-4, 9-3. I'm glad we've gone away with divisions, but the same logic is applied to auto bids, and it's all dumb and annoying, and I can't stand it. But in the Big 12 especially, I think that conference, even more than the ACC, is ripe for a bid stealer. Because in the Big 12, you have the most exciting conference title chase of any league in the country. That includes the SEC. There are a lot of teams that can win the SEC, okay? Just to name a few, Georgia can win it, Texas can win it, Ole Miss can win it, Bama can win it, LSU, Tennessee kind of fringe on that next tier, Oklahoma kind of as well. But you got 4 or 5 teams at the top that you feel, yeah, okay, those are the bona fide conference title contenders. When you look at the Big 12 has the shortest conference title favorite odd. Or the longest, I think, is the correct verbiage there. I'm not in the betting vocabulary sense mentally just yet right now. But what I mean to say is Utah has fluctuated between like a plus 275 and plus 300 to win the league. You look at other conferences, your conference favorite is under plus 200. But Utah's at plus 300 because that league is wide open. So the chances of an 11-1 Utah, for instance, playing a 9-3 Kansas team, am I foreshadowing? I don't know, you tell me. If you have 11-1 Utah and 9-3 Kansas, that 9-3 Kansas team, or even a 10-2 Kansas team, quite frankly, probably isn't getting in unless they get the auto bid. And if you have an 11-win team on the other side, that can be a bid stealing situation because the 11-win team should probably get into the playoff as one of the at-larges because I don't care what Power 4 conference you win 11 games, yeah, you should be in. That there is hardly a Power 4 schedule. I don't even know if there is one that I could look at and say, yeah, if you win 11 games, you're not going to be into the playoff. You're not one of the 12 best and most deserving teams, which should be the criteria. That's how I would assess it. But you could see a team like Kansas do that. You could see a team like Texas Tech sneak up on you, get to the Big 12 championship game, maybe finally have that breakthrough year. Arizona, if I'm wrong on them, they could do that. Kansas State could do it. Utah could do it. Anybody could. The only way the Big 12 doesn't have a bid-stealing moment is if both teams, not just in conference play, but overall record, if both teams in the conference title game have at least 2 losses. If they both have at least 2 losses, there's no bid stealing. They'll just be the one bid leagues that I think they are, the Big 12 and then the ACC. You could have a team in the ACC, like Miami could lose a game to Florida week 1, and they could lose to, any number of teams on their schedule, have 2 losses, and that probably doesn't get you in at 10-2. But 11-2 could, and suddenly if they're playing an 11-1 Clemson or an 11-1 Florida State or a 12-0 Florida State, the way you had in the 2022 Big 12 championship game, yeah, you could see that. What about a 3-loss Clemson? What about a 3 or 4-loss NC State? What if NC State beats Tennessee but loses a couple other games? What if Virginia Tech makes a run? They could all be bid stealers. The possibility, one of you asked me this question, I thought about it and went, man, there could be a lot of teams that could sneak up and be a bid stealer this year where they would win their conference championship, and that's the only way they get in. Hope you like it, because it's what we've got. Everything's great. And that's how we're ending today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.